Great. Fantastic. My name is Jonathan. I know media.
I actually pressed the Timelapse button instead of the video button. And I've been a filmmaker for over 30 years. So...
Can people book you, Jonathan, for jobs?
Let's do that one later. We wanted to give you a beautiful intro, or actually give you the podcast with video as a surprise for the start of the second season. Somehow I pressed time-lapse instead of video, so it's a great start. I think we need to hire some technicians because this is... So we're going to start with the show like nothing happened anyway, and you will see the time-lapse footage because we're stubborn.
Well, and because we simply can't reproduce what we came up with.
And it was a great show, so enjoy the show in all its electric boogie time-lapse glory, and enjoy. Ciao, ciao.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to season 2 of our Root podcast. And we've taken a little break to polish up our exterior, as you can see. We're now visible. You can now put faces to Jonathan and Sandra.
Yeah, we're not AIs.
I'm Sandra Roggerman.
I'm Jonathan Cray.
And we're your hosts for season 2 under a new branding. What are we called now?
A new branding?
Yes.
So we're not going to call it Rude Awakening Podcast?
We're not going to call it Rude Awakening Podcast anymore, but we're still rude. So
the new
Oops,
name...
There goes the neighborhood.
The new name is... Rude Rebels Radio, because we thought it would be a really cool name to also call ourselves, but also call all the listeners that are on this journey as well. And it's kind of a nice name to be under. We're all Rude Rebels.
Yeah.
We're on this journey. We're not better than the other. We're not pretending to know it all, but it's almost like pirates. You're rebels. We're on this journey, and we're sort of making it up as we go along. So we thought the name was very fitting.
Yeah, and since we are Generation X, we need to sort of also play with the old school parts of, the rebel style. And
yeah.
It's almost like you want to have a motorbike gang called Rude Rebels.
Yeah,
I don't know. Is that part of our new brand?
I am going to get a leather jacket at some point with Rude Rebels on the back. Amsterdam chapter.
Exactly. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back. This is season 2, and we've taken this little break to get re-inspired, reinvigorated, so that none of this gets stale. All of this stays on top. Season 1 was an amazing experience for both of us, I think.
Very reflective.
Yeah, and very refreshing to see what it did for me personally. I mean, we've known each other for 9 years now.
8-9 years, yeah.
Almost 9 years. And we've always talked about this journey, and I think the intensity of the talks just sort of got heightened over the years as our own journey got more and more clear. But to put it into a format where you hold yourselves and each other accountable by putting it out into the world.
And hold, the audience accountable. So
yeah,
I thought it was really nice, like listening back to all the podcasts after we recorded it. And in the beginning, I'm like, I don't want to hear myself speak. And what if I said something stupid? So it's that sort of imposter syndrome. But then after I really got into it, I was like, oh my God, I'm talking to myself. I'm sharing a story with Sandra. Sandra shares her stories vulnerably. The listeners react to the stories with their own findings on internet. It was really nice interaction. Like, actually there is a through line, and we're all kind of in the same dynamics, even though all of our expressions are different. So it's for me, it was really, really helpful.
Yeah, and I think also something that we both stand for, and that also Rude Awakening was a product of, is the rawness and the realness, to stay with the R's.
Yeah.
Since my last name is Roggerman. Yeah, it is really being real with yourself. I think that's really probably the number one signature of this journey, or of the self-reflection that occurs on this journey. You have to really take an honest look at yourself, and whatever you think is unworthy, or whatever you think is a flaw or an insecurity, will probably turn out to be your biggest strength.
Yeah, or the gateway to dropping all of that stuff now once and for all, and experiencing something new.
Yeah.
But you have to be willing to, at least I found that constantly, and even last week, you have to be willing to put all the shit on the table, to look at it and go, okay, it's a lot of shit. I don't know what to do with it. It's kind of scary, but I'm going to look at it because it's all mine. So and then when you have an altercation with somebody else, or a drama outside, seemingly outside of you, you can't change the outside or the other, but you can change their own shit that's on the table and how you react to it.
Yeah, and I think that's what we did with season 1. Put everything on the table, like yeah. there's all of the beautiful mess that I've uncovered within myself. So now it's known. Now nothing is in the dark anymore, or at least if it is in the dark, I can very easily now go down into the cellar and just put it on the table with the rest of the mess, and then say, what do I choose to take into the new with me, or how willing am I to declutter it? So the topic for today's show, we thought, let's stick with the beautiful movie title, Lost in Translation. How much of this stuff was lost in translation for you, Jonathan?
Wow, that's a very multifaceted question, but a lot of stuff was lost in translation. And I think for me personally, it was always that weird feeling of just knowing certain things, but not knowing why you know them, and the huge separation between the human that knows it. So there is some people call it divine, or intuition, or flow, or synchronicity, whatever your preference is. And I remember it's something that happened when I was like 16 or 15. Like I was going out. It was the heydays of the house scene, and I knew a lot of DJs, so I was sort of privy to be one of the first on those parties, and see it sort of come to fruition. And I remember being one of the parties, and I didn't dare do drugs. I was too chicken shit for that, because I thought, I have an imagination as it is. So if I take drugs, there goes the neighborhood. So I remember myself standing on a dance floor pretty drunk, but knowing I was drunk. So seeing myself almost from a little higher perspective, a divine perspective, and then wondering why my limbs weren't reacting. Why am I sick? Why am I drunk? But 100% lucid and clear, seeing myself in that position from two angles, and it was so confusing.
That sucks, doesn't it? If you can't even lose yourself.
No, I really couldn't, and that's literally. I think only a couple of years later, I had a big hyperventilation attack because I was just not dealing with things, and I couldn't reconcile the separation properly. Mm-hmm. And it was so intense that after that I didn't dare to go out the house for a couple of years. I did because it was too much to do, but that made me go to the gym and really sort of do healthy stuff.
You could have used a pandemic back then, right?
Really? Yeah.
Where is a good pandemic when you need one?
Jesus. No, so that really set me on my course. But going back to Lost in Translation, for me, it was really hard feeling and knowing something, seeing myself in situations that were completely separated and limited and contracted, and then seeing myself also in the bigger picture of the world that was doing the same thing on their end. So it's like we're all together in a club, and I've never felt so alone. It's kind of a cliche to say, but it was really.
Could have made a Celine Dion video out of that.
Oh my God. It is known amongst my friends how much I love Celine Dion. So, no, but that's the separation. I was, and still being as far in the path that we are, or we consider ourselves to be, it's still an issue. It's becoming lighter. It's becoming, the connection with that divine or with that intuition is much, much stronger. But still bringing it into your human everyday life with all your reactions and all your characters, it's still a thing.
So would you say that at that point, sort of your first memory of observing yourself, that observer came in and all of a sudden you became aware of the separation?
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. Totally. And it was because I was getting into more extreme circumstances with like booze and, wild parties and that sort of stuff. The contrast made it really clear, because before that, I didn't go to parties. The contrast isn't that high. Your life is fairly okay, but that made it so visible. Like, oh my goodness.
So that's a great way of looking at it, because you were in situations where you could sort of see yourself in a context. And again, the human needs the mirror to experience itself. So the bigger the mirror, or the more mirrors you put up, the more facets of yourself you can catch in your reflection.
Yeah.
And in season 1, in case you haven't listened, go back and listen to those 10 episodes. I think it is a prerequisite.
They're pretty awesome, yeah.
To understand our sanity or understand our insanity, depending on your view. But basically, through the journey of self-discovery, so now skipping forward 30 years, for you, 30 plus years, you're getting there. We've isolated ourselves, and then there was the pandemic on top of all of this. So we've taken ourselves back from all of those facets that we got to experience ourselves through outside or in society. Now the world has changed, we have changed. Now we talked about, like, we have to apply ourselves back into life, back onto the canvas of life, so that we understand who we are. And now the observer is not separate anymore. There's still a judgment sometimes on the human flaws or the human reactions to certain impacts. But would you say that your observer is more integrated now, or how would you describe that for yourself?
It feels like that, yeah. It feels like the observer is now actually part of everyday life. It's part of decision making. It's part of whenever I do something for work or make a creative decision, I always really tune into the observer part, the overview. In some circles, they call it Angel's Peak. It's an or Nost. It's an intuition thing. So I always start there, and I know when my mind starts to get involved and say, okay, well, we haven't really harvested that feeling yet. Mm-hmm. So just, take a moment to walk in nature, or I just meditate for actually not that long, but just a little bit, just to get some clarity of what's the feeling. And then basically and I call it the experiencer, the vessel that has to deal with all of this intuition and has to put it in life. That then translates the feeling, and usually that amounts into the intuition is very expansive, and then when the mind translates it, if I do it well, it's still very inspired. It doesn't have a big agenda. It feels very expansive. There's not a lot of details, and it's almost the childlike curiosity to go, now I've put some words to it. They fit, and what is the next step that I can, like the first step that I can do, not step 20, but step 1. And then I do the same cycle. I go into the action, I watch the feedback come in, and again, then the mind has a tendency to go, oh, I know what that looks like. I know that feedback. We have to either embrace it or protect yourself to it. But then also go, okay, there's feedback coming, take a deep breath. There might be a reaction sometimes, and then go back into the intuition. What is the feedback telling me?
So the observer takes the experiencer by the hand and the other way around.
Yeah. And it used to be, and our dear friend Amar had some beautiful words to it. It used to be that the mind was the CEO. And now, so the mind or the experiencer, the human, part of it used to be making all the decisions, and usually from fear or wanting something or wanting to avoid something. And now it's the opposite around. The CEO is the intuition, is the feeling, it's the epiphany, it's the energy, the knowingness. And then the mind or the experience or the human is just simply the executor. It puts words to it. It takes actions. It drives a car. It does its taxes. So it kind of 180. Like it did a 180 from thinking it into reality to knowing it into reality.
I think the separate identities have become one in a way of dancing through life, and we've talked about in the last episode 10, we talked about let it, how does it come to you, or let it come to you.
Yeah.
And is that a divine responsibility, or is that a responsibility of the human? And I think we agreed in the end that it is both cooking the soup together, right? Like bringing the ingredients and then making sure that it is experienced in the human realm. Because what good is any of this experience if it just stays in the realm of vision or bliss mode, kind of, I'm sensing it. But if I can't put it into my senses, my human senses, see it, feel it, taste it, touch it,
express it,
and be moved by it, you know, like that's always my thing. Like, and the more I am one with the experience and the observer, the more I get so passionate about just feeling it within my body, right?
So how is that, like, so how is that for you? Like, is there an example? Because we're talking about this for a reason. Like, we're taking examples of our own lives, right? So what is an example recently where that translation, that bringing it back to words, or what was your experience lately with that? Where you found that was a little bit of a hard thing to do?
Applying my clarity. I think the human part of me always got away with being the little confused lamb on the meadow, like la la la. I don't know what any of this is about. Which, I think I could still get away with, but not within myself, because now I know I want to apply the clarity that I have. I'm a very intuitive person, so now knowing myself so well on both realms, this somehow needs to come together, because if the human still pretends to be the lost little lamb on the meadow, then, it's kind of, I know that game too well now. So for me, reinventing myself after the documentary was done or was realized, which in itself was quite an experience, because I put myself out there as a producer when I wasn't even, I wasn't even trained or schooled to be one. So it was already the journey of becoming. But now afterwards, releasing that experience and saying like, okay, that was a great teacher for me, but now what's next for me?
Yeah.
What's coming next? I really needed to take that grandness and say, how do I want to present myself to life? Not even the world, not even like, what do I want society to think about me? I don't care. Like, now I want to be in life, and I want life to have at least resistance as possible to reflecting my grandness back to me. So I realized I needed to look at my qualities, and they are intuition, clarity, communication, but then also the poetry of the lamb on the meadow. So, there is a playfulness to that, and there's an innocence to that, and there's a romanticism to that. So putting those two together and then saying, what's my strength here? What do I know how to do? Like, you know how to do film really well. So for you, it was very, very clear. It will probably be something like storytelling. And for me, it's storytelling in a different way, but guiding people on this journey. And making them see what their inner wisdom wants to tell them and connect that. So
and it's kind of interesting because you were trained as a coach.
Yeah.
So what did you do differently now? What made you decide to come back to it? Because you quit it for a certain reason, right?
Well, I think the motivation to become a coach came from really wanting to heal myself. So I didn't do it for, to become a coach or to be that. I think it sort of was consequential that I then did for a while have a practice where, I did meditation, retreats, workshops, one-on-one sessions, but also healing sessions because I love that energetic work part of being a coach. So if it's just about the mind, for me, it feels too shallow. It needs to be connected to the energy drive behind it. And just as, that other leg, you can't stand on one leg, so it's both together. But I was in a place still where I needed to put the two together. So again, it's the observer and it's the experiencer. It's the lamb on the meadow versus the grand wisdom that wants to come in. All of those examples that we can come up with needed to come together within me. And I think now I'm in a place in my late 40s where I can allow myself to stumble and fall. I can even put it out into the world and hope somebody will use it as an inspiration. And I don't feel I'm responsible for what other people do with it. And in the past I felt very responsible for, I can't say a wrong thing. What if I misguide?
So adhering to a certain idea that you had about, this is what a coach looks like. This is how you represent yourself.
Yeah, again, the idea of perfection, which I think we're all victim to in every kind of interaction, because the human itself is not enough. It doesn't feel enough. We're not raised with the knowledge of enoughness. So,
but then it's kind of funny. I think you're right. Then the moment that the wisdom does come in, or the magic, or the an idea just plops in your head, then the human can celebrate that for a little while. They go, oh my God, it's a really good idea. But it pretty much immediately goes into restriction. This is how you should do it. So
comparison.
It goes into complete avoidance of pain and trying to attract a little bit of attention, instead of going, I have no clue where this is leading me, but is it inspired? Yes. Is it open? Yes. Cool. We're going to do.
So I think that's probably one of the biggest realizations of this journey, that growth doesn't happen in the comfort zone. I think that was probably one of the first things that I discovered, because I didn't come into this journey from a comfort.
No.
But I came in with a big comfort zone. So, it sounds so cozy. Oh, it's my little comfort zone. Yeah, it's not cozy because
until the nest starts rotting. Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
It's smelly in here. So in the end, you learn to put yourself into the way of growth, which means simply just understanding myself better. And at some point on that journey, you think oh, now I'm done. I kind of know it all. And, it just becomes this righteous entitlement.
I had that yesterday.
I know. But I think now that I can be real with myself, look myself in the mirror and say oh my God, there's so many flaws within myself that I've learned to embrace, that I've started to see as a strength, because it's just, it's still tainted with, I don't want to go there. So as soon as I shine my light on it, I invite it into my presence, and it's not so scary anymore. So what is the dark? The dark is just the unknown. The more I lean into my unknown, the more I can be playful about it and forgive myself for the faults that I'm still making. Hey, after all, I'm still a human.
Yeah.
And then say, that's the human journey of becoming. It will always be this. For me, what was really important is to say, let me also find something that I'm passionate about, that I want to learn now. Right?
Yeah.
Because now with this understanding of who I am, all of this are just parts and pieces that fit into the puzzle, or they don't. I don't have an agenda with it.
But you don't have to like forcefully squeeze the puzzle pieces together, even if they don't go together.
No, because you're afraid basically that it doesn't validate the picture that the world would like to see.
Yeah.
Now that's maybe, and could this even be a thing? Puzzles, by the way, really frustrate me because I just don't have the patience for it. But could this be like an infinity puzzle that keeps adding? So it's never done.
Well,
right?
and I think you're right.
Lost in puzzle.
Yeah, it is a puzzle that keeps unfolding, as long as you know you're puzzling and it's unfolding naturally. Like the next piece will automatically fall. It can fall automatically in your hand, or you can really start fighting and look for it and get frustrated that it doesn't fit.
What's really interesting is if we take that metaphor, and I love being able to come up with metaphors because it makes my human relax more into the unknown again. If I say there's a huge puzzle and all of a sudden new pieces are coming in that don't fit the existing image, I now feel free enough to place them on a side that maybe in itself starts a whole new, it looks like a whole new puzzle, but at some point the two will connect.
Yeah. But and that's the question I wanted to ask you while you were talking, this is very recognizable, but do you find that bringing that wisdom closer, getting more used to that wisdom, which is, for the mind, it's very hard to rely on, or to, you don't get any guarantees with intuition. Like why is that? I don't know. I just know. If you said it to a board meeting in the Fortune 500 company, they'll laugh you out of the room. So it's something that's very, it used to be very unsafe for me. Now I notice that, wait a minute, that part becomes actually a lot stronger. That muscle becomes more trained. And now for me, I'm really leaning into, I'm really relying on intuition. But also knowing that when I do have the aha moments, that I am capable of taking a feeling and translating it into text or an action or words on a paper, which of course with film you kind of have to. So do you feel that you're bringing that intuition more closer? I mean, what has that changed for you compared to the old? So leaning more on the intuition side rather than the human execution side.
It's taken a lot of pressure off of me because I never fit into that structure. It was always difficult for me to make sense of my qualities within the parameters of structure.
Right.
I can function within structure, I can function within pattern, but I think my biggest qualities lie just half a dimension off the visible structure. So it's been difficult for me to find, but it's interesting now because in my head I'm already finishing the sentence. It's been difficult for me to apply myself, but also it's been difficult to get lost completely because nothing really distracted me so much from it. So in a way it was a safe fail, foolproof kind
it's
of
like me
safety net.
Me drunk in the disco, but not really able to completely zone out. So it's always the two. Yeah.
Yeah. So somehow you always set your own journey up in a way that you can't really get lost.
No. And I think that's. I think only for me, it was only in the beginning of the year that I really started to trust that. Also by being just nicer to myself. Like if I make mistakes or I feel guilty or whatever, it's just like, okay, you can feel those feelings. It's okay if you do, but don't judge yourself so hard after you feel the feelings. Okay, I feel very guilty of this. This didn't work out well. I said something stupid. Great, but stick to that part of the story. Don't make another story on top of it because I'm not good enough. And when I was younger, blah 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 blah. So keep it to the initial feeling, or that's at least what I tried to do, and be just a whole lot nicer to myself. And that's ultimately the human relaxed. Like, I can actually make mistakes, which I never could for myself either. So that opened it up enough to actually relax. And when I relax, I feel more. And when I feel more, my intuition is stronger. But it was only after, the beginning of this year and really after 3 months ago, where really that intuition is now the biggest thing I follow. And sometimes I have trouble translating it, or I overthink it. I then put a lot of ideas and thoughts on top of that intuition and sort of completely confuse it. But I get back to it really quickly, usually within a couple hours, and at best the next day or a couple of days later. So I have a way to get out of my own way, or out of my own human's mental way. But still, the translation part of it, and especially when you're working with other people, and this came up last week as well, where you also need to be able, if you decide to be on the planet and stay on the planet as a balanced human being, to sometimes translate your epiphany, your wisdom, into words that some other people can work with, that's recognizable for other people. And what I sometimes did is translate it in my, but of course everybody understands what I'm saying because this is genius. And it might well be or not, but if I can't make it recognizable for somebody that I need to work with, then that my idea of genius, somehow it then doesn't flow. It's kind of gets stuck in my intuition realm and halfway through physicality.
Ultimately, that is why big visionaries, artists, for example, have such a difficult time making their work sustainable and really bringing it into this realm. And I think, because I was thinking while you were speaking, what's very recognizable on this journey, if you compare it with a lot of people, as a child, they were in their happy, blissful lamb mode, right? This is awesome. Then we're told, okay, you kind of need to find out who you are, because quite obviously everybody else knows who they are. The adults know who they are.
Right, yeah.
So, and then once you get there, or once you get closer to it in your teenage years, you sort of go, something's not quite right.
Yeah.
Or at least, when you're called to this journey, I feel that's what happens. Because then that other part comes in that says, yeah, you're not done here yet. If you were supposed to be happy with going on the same holiday every year, like being an accountant for 50, 60 years, nothing wrong with being an accountant, by the way, love them. But if that's your calling, then that's fine. But I think when you're on the journey, there is a restlessness built in that at some point kicks in and reminds you and tickles you and says okay, you're not done yet. And then that frustration of not being able to translate that. That's why, it's
there's
such
a pattern. There's there's a built-in disruption for anything that's a pattern that's not inspired. So if you can keep that up for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, but at some point on this journey, something will happen to disrupt your pattern and your sense of safety and your sense of, it's a shitty life, but at least I know what's coming, to, nope, you chose this somewhere, unconsciously, and now it's time for you to...
And looking at the world, I think the world chose this too. That's the fun part now. That's why I feel now it's such a joy to be alive, because you can feel, especially after Corona, that everybody kind of got a sense of making sense of their existence.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that boring, Jonathan.
It is very... No. No. Yeah, and I think we're moving in. I think you're right. We're moving in a time where that post-Corona era, where people basically take their first steps and start thinking about what actually makes me happy. You see these massive groups of young people saying no to work, not because they're necessarily averse to work, but they want to do something inspired. They want to be paid enough. So it's all those things that have been sort of a same pattern and the same stalemate for, eons of time, that are now all being disrupted. So what a fair few of us did with our journey, and have our awakening and then start searching for what does it all mean, I think on a large scale, that's what the planet is now doing. Yeah. And I think it's a very exciting time. It's also a bit scary, because what happens if you disrupt mass consciousness pattern? So that could go two ways. So it's interesting not to get too caught up with it, but in a way we are a part of it.
And I think that's also where a lot of people on this journey of self-discovery, self-development, get lost on the outside is, the matrix, and you see the man, and those whole confusions that mass consciousness all of a sudden, or society makes it known that you are a disruptor now, for stepping out of it, for saying this is not true for me anymore. And some people do it fighting back and saying but everybody else needs to understand me. And I think that's part of the journey. And for me, it was too. Now everybody needs to understand this awesome thing that I found.
And how can my vision be? I mean, of course, that's the only vision you can. It's logical. It's only. And then how can you think everything different?
Over-explain it to everybody that hasn't asked, everybody that hasn't asked me, and everybody that didn't want to know.
I used to be that person too, but we all have that friend that just did a spiritual course or like assertiveness training, and then calls the whole friend circle like, I want to be clear to you at this point, and then like, you went to a course, didn't you?
Yeah.
It's like overcompensating, and I've done that many times as well. So it's kind of an interesting mechanic. But I'd love to get back to the translation part of it, because what I'm discovering now, like literally this week also, is when I have a really inspired idea, it's an epiphany. There's not an agenda on it. It feels free. There's not a lot of details or steps. It's just, that's what I want to do. And then I'm taking first step. And I keep repeating these steps also for myself to really, that's how it works for me. But then when I have that beautiful idea and then I need to work with somebody, I noticed I have a tendency sometimes to believe that what I'm saying is 100% right and clever, and maybe from my perspective it is, because I'm translating something that only I can feel. But there is also a certain arrogance in then expecting another person to have the same, because I'm translating this from a feeling of intuition. How the hell can I expect anybody to feel the same? I can't.
No, because you're translating your intuition into your vessel, which is tainted by pre-programming, by certain qualities,
a lot of
by
filters,
certain predispositions. Yeah. Well, filters in the negative, but and also qualities in the positive, right? So your intuition will land in a different way with you than with somebody else. And that's once you understand that everybody's right in their own context, there is no more disagreeing or arguing.
And it really is, it really is true. Everybody's right in a way. And then there's preference. There's preference of how do you talk to each other, or what is a pleasant way of working. Like when I make a film, I have a different prerequisite how I want to work with people than when I do a podcast, for instance. There's different rules that I know if I do it this way, I can utilize my intuition and my technical knowledge in the best kind of way. But again, this is my unique expression as a filmmaker. So it has nothing to do with the same guy that is on his or her journey, having the exact same idea as I do. So there is always going to be, I'm discovering, a translation process where I can translate it the best if I translate the inspiration, the essence of the inspiration, but not all of the words and all of the labels. And it's different when you write a script, of course, then you translate it into words. Or
when you write a manual, that is pretty straightforward.
Or a business plan.
Step 3,
But even if I write a business plan, I have to be conscious of, okay, so I'm putting my inspiration on paper, but I'm finding out the less words I use to harness the inspiration, the better. And the only purpose of that document really is translate the inspiration. Because all of the other stuff, like how is that going to look day to day? What is the finances going to look like? Of course, that needs to be in a business plan. But if you have the perfectly worked out business, like a 60-page business plan with prognosis, and it's done by the best guys from Bloomberg, and all of the stuff makes sense and was vetted by lawyers, and it's the perfect setup. But the premise of the whole document is a super uninspired thing, you're going to toss it aside. So,
well, we would. And I think that's also making that differentiation, that not everybody is driven by intuition. I think ultimately if you zoom out enough, they probably are. But, like we say, it lands with a certain predisposition of patterns, of programming, of intent and purpose.
Yeah.
And if there's a certain consciousness, you could say, well, now, everything, all of the parts of you are coming together, but they don't have to. That's the beauty of the human experience. Everything is possible. And, there's 1,000 iterations and playgrounds that you can discover yourself on and experience yourself through. So I'm finding it like I have and maybe you can hear cows and lambs and tractors. It's like we're on a farm. Just context.
We're also doing a weekly agricultural podcast about flowers and
I'm finding like getting to know true Sandra and the gifts that that other part of me is bringing in, that clarity that intuition brings in. I want to experience them through poetry and sensuality. But if I'm trying to write poetry from the mind, it just becomes words. It just becomes a very shallow and very flat piece of work. And literally it feels like work if I feel I need to put it.
So in your, and you could say line of work, but in your expression, the expression that you chose, intuition plays a big role.
Yeah.
And I kind of agree with you. It who is to say that other people, because there's also people that love to use their mind and are perfectly actually have inspiration in being very like scientists or mathematicians or and of course there is always an intuition of I have a hunch about this or that, but there is no, and I think that's kind of the righteousness that sometimes I suffer from, is why doesn't people see it the way I see it? But there's a completely different expression.
Yeah.
And it's great to let their expression be, because it also works the other way around. That also means I can have my expression without worrying about other people.
Well, what's our biggest insight over the past years? Respect and compatibility.
Yeah.
That's, I think, there's a certain attraction that works on all levels. I think like even for the extremely worldly scientist that has no connection to otherworldly stuff, there is a certain physics or metaphysics or energy rule that applies to all of us. You attract people that are on the same frequency.
Yeah.
Whether you believe in that or not, I mean, look at your life. That what you send out, that's what you're going to get back.
Yeah, it's kind of a universal truth that you can apply everywhere. Yeah.
And I think now combining the two, I read something that felt very real and true for me. So the heart is an attractor, the heart is magnetic. The mind is a signal sender, right? I
like that.
Yeah. So once the two play together, I can really make sure that I am attracting exactly what I know the bigger picture is, And maybe that was the disconnect for a while, that those two didn't play together. So the mind had an idea about this is the line of work that I should be doing because my parents told me, that's just the family heritage you're born into, I don't know, doctors' families or lawyers or whatever. And for me, coming to the conclusion, I don't need to live up to other standards, but I can become my own standard by using all of my qualities, which in my case is intuition and structuring energy systems, channeling them into clarity, into the human language, and now playing and dancing with it and enjoying the beauty of human language. That for me feels right.
Yeah.
But I'm still allowing myself to grow into other versions of myself, right? And then I'll attract people along the way that are like that. But I'm not attracting out of my wounds anymore. And the wounds were very much, like you find it in your partner search. You might attract somebody who's here's the victim and here's the perpetrator and or the savior.
And it's usually kind of like no matter what you attract, it's usually a reflection of where you basically were in yourself or the type of people you attracted in the past.
Or what I need to look at within myself. Again,
that's
I bring it back to me, and that's why I love. Everything that we do is ultimately about your self-experience.
Yeah.
You can't even blame it on the world and say like, oh, the world is so fucked. Yeah, but if you start right here and understand your own energy dynamics, then you can offer the world a version that is pretty joyful to interact with.
Yeah.
How great is that?
I love it. Yeah, and it is at a certain point. It is not concerning yourself with what the outside world thinks. But of course, when I grew up, I remember vividly as a kid that, this is a wonderful world until I was like 8 and it was some messy family situation. And then I went from this world is a big playground to, oh my God, I need to protect myself because everybody's crazy. And so that framework I took with me even today, so that plays a role. So whenever I express something, that filter is on. I think the big difference is now that everything from that trauma is now on the table. So I don't have to circumvent it or build even bigger walls around it. I'm willing to look at it, and once in a while it hurts. But there's nothing I don't want. I don't want to look at, or there's nothing I avoid anymore. It's it's shitty sometimes, but
so through the aspect that got separated along the way through trauma and pain and hurt, you were able to make a facet out of it because you took it home and you say, okay, I'm aware of this pain point within me.
Yeah.
And now that makes you an expert to speak about the healing that you've made possible for yourself. And through that, you will inspire others. And I firmly believe that that's our responsibility as human beings, that if you're going through extreme trauma, which can be really difficult to see, but there is a gem in there that you'll be able to offer the world.
Yeah, by having gone through it.
And, you can say nobody really will ever understand what I've gone through, but there's probably hundreds or thousands or 100,000s of experiences that are similar like that could take the reference to inspire their own healing. So I think, at least for me, that's true, that I need to, that's a calling that I feel pulled towards, that I want to offer, and that how I want to interact with life. And then you end up in a podcast like this.
Yeah. Yeah, you all did it yourself.
Who would have thunk?
Yeah, who would have thunk it? Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, I think this was a beautiful start to our first episode of season 2 of the Rude Rebels podcast.
Ooh.
Yeah, let us know what you think of the title. Over this new season, we'll let you know more and more what Rude Rebels have to offer, the Rude Rebels, Jonathan and Sandra, have to offer. And if there's maybe more Rude Rebels out there, if you consider yourself one, you're our tribe.
Let's start a revolution. Sorry, it was
God.
really bad. We're still working on it. We're still work in progress.
One step at a time. Exactly. So yeah, we're excited. We're back. Hope you're excited too. Let us know what you think. You can write into podcast@rude-devils.com.
Say that again. You said devils.
Devils. Devils.
Rude Webbles.
Rude Webbles. Cut.
So, www.rude-rebels.com.
That will be our website. It's not quite up yet, but we do have an email you can write to, podcast@rude-rebels.com.
Good at success. We hope you enjoy your weekend, and we see you next week.
Yes. Bye.